Welcome to The Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to The Plant Report because every plant has a story. Our plant today is Titan Arum, also known as the corpse flower. These plants are extremely rare in both captivity and in the wild, and when I had a chance to see this unusual plant just before it bloomed at the University of California, Santa Barbara, I had to go. I met with Danica Tabor, UCSB Biology Greenhouse Manager. We spoke standing right next to the Titan Arum. We were occasionally joined by visitors who wanted to see this unusual plant for themselves. Danica, if you could tell us the Latin name of this plant.
This is Amorphophallus titanum.
And then it has a shortened name that David Attenborough, I think, dubbed this plant.
He did. He was uncomfortable saying Amorphophallus titanum for the duration of his segment on Titan Arums for his documentary, The Private Life of Plants. So he named it the Titan Arum.
Which is easier to say, I guess.
It is easier to say, and it seems a little random, but Titan means giant, and the plant is actually an arum. It's from the arum family, Araceae.
Perfect. That was my next question. What's the family, and what other plants are in that family? Do you know?
I do. Calla lilies, which many people are familiar with, are also in Araceae, as are Jack in the Pulpit.
What's the name of this plant? The nickname that you've given her?
Oh, we call her Chanel.
What was the purpose of the name?
Chanel's mother plant, actually, if I can clarify, it's not actually a female plant. It's monoecious. It has both male and female flowers on it. So it's a bit of a gender-bending profile, like gender profile, to call it Chanel. Call Chanel her, I should say. But we decided to name it Chanel because Chanel's mother plant was named Tiny. There's a bit of irony going on there. And Chanel is sometimes associated with a notable fragrance. And Titan Arums themselves produce a very notable fragrance.
Which you'll be smelling probably, tomorrow or the next day?
Which we will be smelling at some point over this weekend. Hi. Come on in. Have you been following along with the flower that just bloomed in Washington, D.C.? Okay, well, we're really fortunate here in Santa Barbara to have our corpse flower here because over 22,000 people showed up to see the one that bloomed in Washington, D.C. It's really special that you get to have this one-on-one time with her, basically. They're widely known as the corpse flower because they smell so bad, but it's not actually a flower. What it is the world's largest compound unbranched inflorescence. That sounds really complicated, I'm sure, but you were already really familiar with unbranched inflorescences because every time you look at a daisy, you're looking at an unbranched inflorescence. It's not one flower when you see a daisy. That's actually hundreds of little flowers in the yellow center that are really small, and then more flowers around the edge that look like each petal. So what we see here is something similar, where it resembles a flower, but what we have here is this is actually a modified stem, and this ruffled skirt, is a modified leaf, not a petal. It serves the same purpose as a petal by opening and turning blood red to attract pollinators. But really, all of the true flowers are down at the base here. There's a ring of hundreds of male flowers sitting atop a ring of hundreds of female flowers. And there could be a problem if you're one plant and you have your male and female flowers sitting right next to each other. What might that problem be? Any ideas?
Self-pollination.
Self-pollination, right. Inbreeding isn't good for humans, right? It's not good for plants either. So
you might end up with a corpse flower that smells like a rose.
You
That's a long shot. No?
What's a way that a plant could get around self-pollinating if it has female flowers right next to male flowers? Do you have any ideas? The way that the Titan arum gets around it is by timing the blooms differently. So the female flowers will bloom first and then wilt, and then the male flowers will bloom. So there shouldn't be any time when both sexes of the flowers are blooming at the same time. Because of this, the stink is actually tied to the female flowers, because that's when the plant wants to attract the pollinators. So the Titan arum only blooms for 24 to 48 hours. It's a really short window of time, especially considering that it takes the Titan arum 5 to 7 years, maybe 10 years of putting up a leaf like this in order to gather enough energy to afford to put up a bloom of this magnitude. 24 to 48 hours is the only window that it has to attract pollinators for that entire lifespan. For that purpose, the stench becomes really powerful only in the first 4 to 8 hours or so of the female flowers being active and receptive. And after that, the smell dies down and the male flowers become active. They can pollinate. So when we normally think about pollinators, we think of certain bugs, right? What kinds of bugs? Flies. You hit it right on the nose, actually. Normally we see bumblebees and butterflies pollinating the pretty smelling flowers, but for the Titan arum, for the corpse flower, it wants to attract flies. That's why it smells so bad. That's why its big petal-like spathe looks deep red like meat. And that's why actually this hollow stem here actually heats up to human body temperature to help spread the smell.
Wow.
It's really interesting.
How does it do that?
It burns lots of carbohydrates that it has stored in its underground corm, which is similar in structure and function to a potato. So during the 5 to 10 years when it's putting up a single leaf every year, which can get 10, 15, 20 feet tall, it can be the size of a tree, even though it's one leaf. Every year that it puts that leaf up, it's photosynthesizing, it's gathering light energy, and then it's storing it underground in the corm so it can burn the energy, produce a flower, and also heat up the spathe. Hi. Have you guys seen a corpse flower before?
No.
You want to come on in and get a little close?
I've seen it once.
Once? Yeah.
Last time he was here.
Was that back in 2002?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you get to smell it?
No.
Do you want to smell it?
No, thank you.
This one doesn't really have a smell yet.
Not yet.
Very faint. Very faint.
So it's just a matter of hours before he blooms?
I'm thinking it's going to go over the weekend now.
Over the weekend.
But the smell can be so bad that at one institution, vultures actually circled the buildings because they were looking for the decaying animal. And unfortunately, that is the period when the smell is the worst, is when the female flowers are the most receptive. So that's the period when, if you want to pollinate a Titan arum, whether you're a fly or a greenhouse manager, you have to go in down next to the stink. Mm-hmm. And we're actually getting pollen from the Washington, D.C. bloom that happened earlier this week to try that. So, yeah.
And how do you pollinate it?
There are a couple of ways. You can use a really long-handled paintbrush and daub some pollen onto the female flowers. What I've also seen is that people can have cut windows through the spathe with a scalpel so that instead of really prying down into the flower, they can just access a few and then leave the rest of it relatively undisturbed. Any questions? Yes.
So it stores energy for this bloom.
It does.
Its whole lifetime.
Its whole life. It's in the business of making the next generation like every other organism out there.
And then how tall do these plants get?
In the different stages, they can achieve different heights. They produce one leaf per year, every year for the first few years of its life. That leaf can get between 10 and 20 feet tall. As far as the inflorescence goes, the tallest inflorescence on record in cultivation is 8 feet tall. So Chanel is actually a shorty because Chanel is only 4 feet 7 inches.
Kind of like her mom, Tiny. No?
Kind of like her mom, Tiny. Tiny was about 5 feet tall when it flowered.
I've read that these plants have a really fast growth rate.
They do, actually. As of July 12th, Chanel was only about 2 feet tall. And since then, just exploded in growth. Average growth rate was 3 inches per day for the last week or so. That first weekend, she put on a whole foot.
And then I also read online that there's only been 175 blooms in cultivated species since 1889. Is that true?
That's on record. That's a rough number because that's the number of publicized bloom events, but around 175, 200 blooms since it was discovered 135 years ago.
What makes the smell? Like, are there chemicals inside this plant? How does it create that amazing smell?
There are 2 chemicals that have been identified as causes of that smell. They're both sulfur-based. So if you think of rotten eggs, that scent is also often caused by sulfur. The 2 chemicals specifically are dimethyl disulfide and dimethyl trisulfide. What it's aiming to do by creating such a massive stink in a tropical rainforest is to outstink all the other sources of decaying, odoriferous, tempting scents that would lure flesh flies and carrion beetles. So it's targeting the decomposers of the rainforest.
And then I wonder if when they get on the flower, they're a little confused, thinking, what is this?
They are probably, as far as an insect could be confused, probably quite confused about why they're where the smell is strongest and there's nothing to eat.
And the heat.
And the heat too.
Lastly, I read online that Chanel's home is the Sumatran rainforest and that they're actually threatened by deforestation. Could you mention just a few words about that?
Certainly, that's correct. Chanel's species, Amorphophallus titanum, is found only on the island of Sumatra in the wild, and upwards of 70% of the rainforest has been cut down at this point to make way for palm oil plantations, because palm oil is a really, really widely used ingredient in chapsticks, lotions, food products. It's very versatile for lots of different industries, and unfortunately, that's where the money is going.
I know, and that's actually in a lot of natural products too.
It is, because palm oil is a natural ingredient, but it is not conservation friendly. Yeah. There are other vertebrate species too that are at risk because of palm plantations, including orangutans and a Sumatran elephant.
I've read about that. It's really sad. So anything else that I didn't ask you about this plant that you'd want to share with listeners?
I'd just like to reiterate that it's really special that we can be so close to this bloom. And I think the bloom earlier this week in Washington, D.C. really helps drive that point home because, again, 22,000 people showed up to see that bloom. We have the exact same event going on here, and we're able to have some quiet moments with it. It's really impressive. And in fact, the timing is excellent because we're receiving pollen from the American Botanical Gardens Conservatory from that bloom earlier this week, so we can pollinate Chanel.
So I know what you're going to be doing in the next few days.
Holding my nose, yes.
5 days later, I'm back at the UCSB campus heading toward the corpse flower to see exactly what this flower smells like and looks like. Well, there's a line to get in to see the flower. There's about 100 people here in line to check out this amazing plant. Why did you come to see this plant?
I just saw the one that was blooming back east. I didn't see it, but I saw about it, and then I was like, oh wow, that would have been cool to see. And then just so happened to read an article about this one, and I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna miss this one. So
What about you?
It's our anniversary, and so this is where we are coming.
This is great. You'll always remember this anniversary.
Yep, definitely.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Hey, Danica. How was it?
Oh, it was phenomenally stinky. It was. There were some authentic grimaces when it was going on. It was stomach churning. I'm not that sad to see the smell go. Honestly, it's something. If you can get one whiff of it,
Okay.
you're in and out. It's okay.
But
If you
not.
have
And
to-
did you pollinate, Chanel?
We did. We pollinated her in two events. One last night around 10:30, and then once today around 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Can't wait to see her.
When I approached Chanel, I could smell her fragrance, not from a mile away, more like 3 feet. And the closest way I can describe it is extremely dirty socks. I spoke with someone, though, who had been with her at the height of her bloom.
So you were here last night. Can you tell us what this beautiful flower smelled like?
Early in the evening, it was just very much like a heavy compost. Then I'd say about 7:30 towards 8, I would equate it to a teenage boy's room with sweaty socks and BO and everything. And then by 9, when I had to leave, I was getting really nauseated because it started the decomposing smell, and that wasn't even the height, so I can't even imagine how bad it was when they had to do it when it peaked at midnight, I think. So when I got home, to leave here, because I was standing next to the plant taking pictures, helping doing things, and so when I left, I reeked. So I had to drive home with my windows down and undress in the garage, do the laundry, and take a shower. It was horrible. I felt queasy all night long. So
the smell really clung to your clothes.
yeah, kind of like a campfire does.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.